Roll call, day 18, Wednesday, March 6, 2024. Anderson. Here. Baldwin. Barlow. Beitman. Here. Boner. Here. Bouchard. Brennan. Here. Case. Cooper. Dockstetter. Ellis. French. Here. Furphy. Here. Guru. Hicks. Here. Hutchings. Ide. Here. Jones. Kinski. Here. Kolb. Present. Landon. Larson. Here. McEwen. Here. Nethercott. Here. Pappas. Here. Rothfuss. Here. Salazar. Here. Schuler. Scott. Here. Steinmetz. Here. President Driscoll.
Here.
Baldwin.
Excused.
Case.
Excused.
Bouchard. Landon present. Cooper.
Excused.
Dockstetter.
Excused.
Ellis.
Excused.
Guru. Guru. Excused. Hutchings.
Excused.
Jones.
Excused.
And Schuler. Here. Schuler present. Mr. President, 20 present, 11 excused.
Thank you. Prayer by Pastor Jake Merriman.
Please join me in prayer. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Father, I thank you that when you call us to a task, you also supply the strength that is needed to carry it out as we look to you. I again thank you for the men and women of our state Senate. Give them the strength to carry out the tasks before them. As they near the end of this session, help them to have the stamina and the perseverance that they need to keep going until the job at hand is done. It is a great and demanding task to which you have called each of them. The level of preparation, focus, attention to detail, engagement in conversations and deliberations is weighty. It requires much. Bless the work of their hands and provide for them in such a way that they will not grow weary of doing good. Help them to contribute in such a way that when their work here is done, that they would be able to enjoy a sense of accomplishment and peace. Protect and bless also their families and care for them and the toll it takes when so much is given. As life does not pause during session, provide for every need that has come up during this time. Thank you that you are sufficient for all of this and more, infinitely more than all we could ask or imagine. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Senator Ide, lead us in pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to change things up a little. We've got a group here, and rather than going through our normal order of business, we're going to come into it later. They've been patiently standing for quite a while. This morning, we've got a special performance by Laramie High School's Chamber Orchestra. Group will be playing three pieces. maybe 4 if we can beg on them a little bit. They're directed by Jennifer Lyford. Please help me welcome them heartily to the Senate. Senators in the front row, if you will turn your mics towards the front. Can't do it. All right.
I would just like to introduce our pieces to you. The first piece is called Danzas de Panama, and it's by an Afro-American composer named William Grant Still. We will be playing the second movement of it. It contains 2 vivacious dances to get our blood moving today. And it's a wonderful piece that will hopefully give you ideas of folk music from Panama. So this is Danzas de Panama, William Grant Still. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our group. This is our top orchestra at Laramie High School, and it is an audition-only group. And we aren't full force today. We have a few missing members. These kids are very, very busy. Most of these kids are 4.0 students who are bound for college, and we've got even a couple of state science fair winners, and lots of awards in this group right here. But the one thing that we love doing together is making music. And we're so happy that we could be here today to offer you this gift for the work that you do, because we know what you do is super important for their education and growing up in such a great state. So the next piece we're going to play, I'm actually going to do a little pinch hitting, and I have to go play some second violin because we're missing some of our second violins. It's a wonderful piece by the Finnish composer Sibelius. It's called Impromptu. It's actually originally written for piano. It's two impromptus put together. And the first one is a little bit more haunting in a minor key, and the second one is a little more light and whimsical. So probably lots of moods that have been going along in the last couple months here. So we hope you enjoy, and take a little time for yourself to just be in the music, so you don't have to think about all the big worries on your minds right now. So this is Sibelius Impromptu. That will come. I know that one ended with the somber part of it, but we're going to play for you now some fiddle tunes. This is American Triptych. We have 3 fiddle tunes featured here: Arkansas Traveler, Fire on the Mountain, and Devil's Dream. So now that you have had some time to relax, this is time to get the blood going again. so much again for having us here. We have the traditional for you, just because. You need it, you deserve it. Here we go, guys.
It gets no better. Thank you very much. Way to put a smile on the entire body. Kind of fun. Thank you again. That was really, really special. All right, Randy. Reading, correction, and approval of journal.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 5, 2024 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
Is there any objections? Being none, the report's adopted. Doctor for the day is Matt Strang, MD, Family Medicine, Cheyenne. Come on out. Welcome, Matt. Thank you very much. Nurse for the day is none, and the Wyoming history today, I'm not going to do the one they gave me. I'm going to read a whole list to you. March 6th is actually an incredible day in Wyoming history. I'm going to read you 4 or 5 of these that came up that are kind of interesting. 1890, Wyoming was the last state in 1890 to join the Union. Benjamin Harrison signed the statehood proclamation on July 10. But March 6 is considered Wyoming Statehood Day, as it marks the date when the state's constitution was ratified by Congress. So this actually is the true Wyoming Statehood Day. Wyoming Territorial Legislature passed a bill on March 6, 1869, establishing the University of Wyoming. The university opened its doors in 1887 and is our only 4-year university. In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed the Yellowstone National Park Protection Act into law. This established Yellowstone as the first national park in the United States. In 1924, Wyoming became the first state in the country to elect a female governor, Nellie Taylor Ross. She took office on January 5, 1925, but her inauguration ceremony was held on March 6, which was also her birthday. Kind of neat. This is also the day that 1901 that the Wyoming Territorial Prison came into being. So March 6th, really kind of an interesting day when you go through it. Normally you don't have a whole lot. So quote for the day, let your hope, not your hurts, shape your future. Last day for second reading, bills in second house. Reminder, you guys have mailboxes full in the back, need to go pick your mail up. Some of it might be friendly, some not, so it's all there. See what we got here. Concurrences. And so on. Look what we have here. We need to do House failed to concur on Senate amendments. Randy, do you have I just need to appoint a committee on 138? Okay, so concurrence committee on, joint conference committee, excuse me, on House Bill 138, Senator Case chairman, Senator Nethercott, and Senator Landon. So bring us back proud. Senator Pappas, if you're ready, on message number 237 on Senate File 113. Reading clerk, read it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Message number 237, referencing Senate File 113, light and high-profile vehicle closures 2.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our friends down the hall made a couple of small changes that I think actually made the bill better. They don't materially change the bill at all, but they enhanced the provisions of the bill. You'll see on page 2, line 14, 13 and 14, the purpose of the bill was for light and profile vehicles. The body down the hall added or other weight-based closures. There's been issues on some of our other roads where violating a weight-based closure is just as bad as having a blowover. So this just adds that additional penalty to drivers who actually violate the weight-based closure, as well as any high-profile vehicle. And then the second change was down, still on page 2, lines 21 and 22. They have deleted for a second or subsequent offense. Currently in the bill, it was 1 year after the first offense. And that would allow a repeat violator to violate it every year, once a year, and still not have any consequences for a second violation. So what they did, and I think it's a logical change, is to change it to 3 years after conviction or a violation of this subsection. So a second it has to be a conviction, but it can be within 3 years, so that it precludes someone from violating it every year and still getting off. So I think it's a good bill, good changes to the bill, and I ask you to support the changes that the body down the hall did. Thank you.
The motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 113 and vote aye. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 113. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Barlow? Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Docksteder? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas?
Aye.
Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. French? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 113 concurrence vote, 22 aye, 9 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 113. Senator Steinmetz, are you ready on message 214 on Senate File 14?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Can we have the reading clerk read it in, please?
Message number 214, referencing Senate File 14, State Fair Board Powers and Responsibilities.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move concurrence on message number 214 and urge you to vote aye. Fellow senators, this is the State Fair Board Powers and Responsibilities, and what they did down at the House is just put that in the Department of Procurement and A&I, and they took out the Attorney General review on this, and so it's a good change. I checked with the good chairman who brought this bill to us from another county, and so we believe this makes the bill better, and we would urge your aye vote on concurrence.
The motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 14 and vote aye. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 14 concurrence roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Docksteder? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 14 concurrence vote, 30 aye, 1 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 14. Do we have any messages from the House, Randy? No messages from the House. Okay. Bills on second reading. House Bill 4, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 4, engrossed, Property Tax Refund Program.
House Bill 4 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 92, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 92, Protection of Parental Rights.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 92, second reading amendment number 1, corrected copy, page 1, line 1, delete.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 92 and ask for your favorable consideration. This bill does two things. The first is on page 2, lines 1 through 6. We are taking out including all courts of the state. That in essence will take out all of the old language in statute 2, so it removes that. And then we also add in if parental rights are violated under this subsection, in this section, the parent shall have grounds for civil cause of action against the violator for actual damages only. And so that is basically what it does. The rest is conforming to that, and I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Discussion. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'd just ask why wouldn't they already have access to the courts? Is there some reason that they wouldn't have access to civil recourse? I would expect that to be in place right now. I think it's already working through the courts. So what does this actually do?
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, actual damages. It seems that if a district's not doing something, you would ask the court to issue some kind of declaratory judgment. So I don't understand that either. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just something to make sure that if their rights are violated, that they definitely, it is brought into this statute that they shall have the grounds for the civil cause of action against the violator, and to kind of contain it to their actual damages. So that's what the amendment does. It's a policy decision, and that's what the amendment does. Thank you.
Thank you. We're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 92. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 92 has passed the Senate. Back on the bill. House Bill 92 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 125, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 125 engrossed to repeal gun-free zones and preemptive amendments.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 125, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 3, line 4, after.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125. Fellow senators, I know that we were instructed last night not to bring any amendments to this bill, but frankly, I couldn't get to sleep, and then I woke up early thinking about this. So I did a little homework. Some of the states that were referenced yesterday in our debate, and it was interesting to find out that the state to the west of us, the Panhandle state that stretches all the way up to that other country, they have this particular situation locked down completely. You're not allowed to carry a firearm in a residence hall. You're not allowed to carry a firearm to the football game. I didn't feel like it was the sense of the body that we should go that far. The state to the south of there, which was referenced several times, actually does what this amendment does, and that is to allow the local governing authority of our colleges and our university to promulgate some rules to take care and ensure the health and safety in the residence hall environments and the dormitories. Folks, I think this is a really important piece. The second part of the amendment goes to situations that occur with regard to accreditation, laboratory environments. There may be a situation come forth that from a national sanctioning body in terms of activities that the university in particular might need to deal with. Or sometimes a national event that one of our colleges has the opportunity to host, for example. It just feels like to me to give a little bit of that flexibility would certainly allow me to get in a position of supporting this legislation, which I want to do. That was part of the problem we had the night before last. We simply didn't have time in my mind to fix some of the things that really concerned me about the bill. Folks with a lot of experience through the years in what I used to do for a living, and I can tell you that that particularly the residence hall piece, I hope that you will consider this. It's unanimous among our colleges that they could use our help on this front. The university could certainly use our help. I don't think that we want firearms tucked underneath mattresses or underneath the beds. You know, there has to be some kind of opportunity to address specific situations at the university and those colleges. So that's the amendment. Mr. President, I appreciate your consideration. I hope you'll support it.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. First thing I heard is about the football game, or that strikes me as something we're mentioning. You know, unless they shut down the alcohol sales, there's not going to be a problem there, because this bill prohibits guns where there's alcohol in a game. As far as the other thing, you know, what we're doing here is prescribing that they can promulgate rules for health, safety, and welfare. They can do that. This just puts another layer of something where we're trying to get the camel's nose under the tent to regulate the Second Amendment rights that are protected. I mean, we keep using these terms, you know, like things like guns under the mattresses and under the beds. Man, I don't keep my guns there. I mean, you know, these are just very loose terms of all of a sudden is a thought that we're going to have thousands of people on a campus all of a sudden. These are the same arguments that they use on constitutional carry. There are not things happening, scary things, since we made the state a constitutional carry state. Where are all the things that can be pointed to where you don't even have to have a permit around the state? People walk in stores, they're walking around all over the state, and you don't even know they have a gun. And the sky is not falling. This is Wyoming. We aren't Chicago. We aren't, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President, we're not one of these big cities that have these problems with so many criminals that are actually creating the problem, where they have disarmed the citizens. This is just a bill to allow law-abiding citizens to carry. It's not scary. We've already tested it. We were one of the early testers of the theory. If you take away the permits, we're not going to have a problem. I think it's that simple. On and against the amendment. We don't need to slow this bill down in the process.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none. Excuse me. Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be on and against the amendment. You know, my daughters are getting close to that age where they're going to be heading off to college, and you know, I would want them to be able to have their firearm in their purse in their dorm room for protection. I would feel much safer having them go to a school where they're allowed to protect themselves from sexual assault, any kind of violence that may occur in the dorms. This amendment would prohibit that. And it basically renders the bill useless to that effect. And I would urge you guys to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I want to make 2 points, and I respect the chairman of judiciary, but I'm against this amendment. Either we have Second Amendment rights for everyone, or we don't. Now we're going to pick and choose who has the right of the Second Amendment because of their age, because of where they live. I think that's wrong. The other thing that I'll mention is, and this was brought up years ago when I had a very significant gun bill in 2018. You know, 18-year-olds, they are responsible. We have them in the military. I've stood with them for 27 years. We give them M16s to fight for our country. And you know what? They're responsible. They are responsible people. They've proven it to our country throughout this history. Don't take it away from them. Don't take it away from them. I'm against this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, looking at lines 12 to 14 in the amendment, we're talking about satisfying achieving national regional accreditation standards. I'm torn on this amendment, and I'm concerned about those particular lines. Are some of those accreditation standards likely to come from organizations that are really based in places where there's a good deal of hostility to firearms? And is that particular provision, are we delegating too much authority to an outside body that may be prejudiced against what we're trying to achieve? I'd like a little discussion on what the implications of that particular provision are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out, at our committee meeting, we had several students from the university come over the hill to testify, and they stuck around till late at night. And they made it clear they are not comfortable having some of the students in the dorm rooms having guns. They felt very uncomfortable with that. And so several of them testified to that effect. So I just wanted to point that out. It doesn't make many of the students feel comfortable if there's a gun in the dorm. It's just the opposite. They feel very uncomfortable with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask to divide the amendment. Division 1 would be lines 1 through 11. Division 2 would be lines 1 through 8 and lines 12 through 14. Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. Division 1 would be lines 1 through 11. Division 2 would be lines 1 through 8 and 12 through 14. Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President?
Yes.
On Division 1, I just want to talk about trusting children. I trust my children. I think the question is if, assuming my kids go to the University of Wyoming, depending on when the dorms get done, I remember in how they are now, you have 2 occupants that share a very, very small space. And so unless your student is carrying their weapon to them to go to the bathroom and making sure that it's monitored at all times, there's always the concern that the roommate would have access to that firearm. And I think it's just a practical question. How does that work? I don't know that that's been addressed. We all assume that everyone's got their own private suite where they've got expectations of privacy. My recollection as a UW grad was my roommates and I shared clothes and people were in and out of our room all the time. I think that's a concern. So I just want some discussion on how that would work.
We're on Division 1. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for Division 1, but a little bit of context that I don't think has been discussed with regard to this bill, and perhaps Division 1 helps. It's going in that direction, but I don't know if it solves the problem. Mr. President, the university currently has a policy that all freshmen live in the dorms, in the residence halls. The interesting circumstance here is now we've removed choice on whether or not you want to live in a place where fellow students that you may not have even met because you've been assigned a roommate in a double dorm room that has a weapon. You don't get to opt out. So I think one of the benefits to this amendment would at least be instructing the university to come up with policies that would allow for that safety of those students. And I hope, Mr. President, that one of the things that it would then allow for is a complete rewrite of the residence hall policies where now freshmen would no longer have to be on campus. Now, that is detrimental to the college experience. There's good sound evidence that indicates that university students are more successful if they participate in a residence hall and have the educational support in their first year. That's the reason why most universities have that same policy around the country. But in this circumstance, now we are forcing students to live in a situation where they may feel uncomfortable and feel at risk and in danger because we are removing any right they may have, any right whatsoever they may have to avoid living in a space where someone else has a weapon, sleeping at night with somebody that they don't even know that has a weapon, that we assert we all trust. They could never do anything wrong. That is not consistent with my experience on the University of Wyoming campus. But that's the assertion. And now we're taking away that right. And I think that can be done, Mr. President. There's some unintended consequences there. Obviously, that aspect of ensuring that they have that initial experience, but the other side of it is the structure of the finance for the new residence halls does depend on that policy specifically. So as we write a new policy, there's going to be some financial challenges probably for the university. I don't quite know how this affects the residence halls. I guess I would welcome input on folks, whether some of our residence halls have similar policies for those that are out of town. They may, and it may affect them as well. But I think this amendment is a good step in trying to protect those students that do not want a well-armed roommate with a couple of AR-15s in their tiny little closet. That doesn't seem like a healthy collegiate environment in my mind, but with this legislation, obviously, we're trying to protect that right. I hope we can pass this amendment and try and protect those students that don't want to live in that world.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's go back in time a little bit as we put forward this panic. I got my first shotgun when I was 10 years old. I used to drive my truck to school with guns in the back of it. I think the whole time I was at school, there was never a shooting incident. Well, I know for a fact there wasn't. The other issue I want to push back on is I read the Second Amendment. There's nothing in the Second Amendment that gives you the right to be around somebody who doesn't have a gun. We keep saying you have this right. Everybody has a right to bear arms. They can carry a gun if they want. They can if they don't. We have laws that protect behavior with guns. We have penalties for people who act up. But at the end of the day, these are young adults. They can make decisions on their own. And I truly don't believe the entire campus is going to go out and buy a gun tomorrow because they can have one. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I heard the scary tactic again, a black rifle, an AR-15. How many in this room have carried an AR-15 with their concealed carry permit? I don't think that's what this bill talks about. You know, my daughter went to UW. And I continually was involved trying to get her ability to carry when she had a permit. I tried to solve that problem at the university. And we had no luck. We couldn't get the chief security. The way the law is written now, the chief of security must approve the carrying of a concealed weapon by a permit holder. And we tried and tried and tried. So every time I saw a campus mishap, I mean, the worst one that I saw was a young lady was beheaded on a campus. And as the police officers drove up, he was holding her head in his hand at a cafeteria. And I sent that article to the security chief at UW. And after continually refusing to let my daughter carry, I sent it with an attachment that said, "I hope you can sleep at night." And that's what this is about. Another way that we can take away, in this case, a woman's right to protect herself on a campus. And I see some faces on smirks out there. This is what happens when people can't protect themselves. Somebody can take a knife from a cafe and decapitate them, behead them. Nobody likes to hear it, but that's what happens. It happened on a campus, it didn't happen, this isn't dreamland. Look it up if anybody wants to question it. If you're scared of things, you should be scared of the bad guys. They're the ones that come in, they're the ones that do things wrong. And by the way, we're talking about making rules. Who made all these other rules that we're saying now we're supposed to put them in this bill and be more prescriptive and we're going to sit here and make rules of how they make rules? They can't figure out, well, gee, this student has a gun and this one doesn't like it. We can move them around into a different room. You mean to tell me we got to make a rule for that? I think that's simple. I think they can figure that out, right? The people that run these places are pretty smart, aren't they? They can figure that stuff out. On and against the division.
Thank you, Mr. President. I call for the yeas and nays in Division 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On and against the amendment, and just wondering where the fear of firearms is coming from and the fear of possibly having one in your dorm rooms. And I kind of wrote out a list of things that if I'm afraid of a firearm, I need to also be afraid of bottles, knives, forks, books, sticks, clubs, ropes, pens, pencils, box cutters, baseball bats, rulers, scissors, high heel shoes, purses. The list of weapons goes on and on. This is so important to be able to allow our students to be able to protect themselves, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you guys have all read this little blue book in front of me here more times than I have. But Article 1, Section 24, Declaration of Rights, says right to bear arms. The right of citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and of the state shall not be denied. I don't think, to me, that means everybody. People in college, young kids in college that are fighting wars when they're 18 years old. So I think we're not following the Constitution if we are in favor of this amendment, on and against this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague from Campbell County with the nostalgia about the old high school parking lot with the rifle racks in the backs of the pickup trucks and the weapons in those vehicles, and we didn't have any problems. I do remember those days. It reminds me, I read a great book by, I'm going to just give one proper name, by the late Justice Scalia. And he was a teenager in the Bronx, but he went to high school in New York. and he was on the shooting team. And he said 3 days a week, he'd put his rifle over his shoulder and get on the subway. Nobody thought anything about it. That was the 50s. He says now you can imagine the panic if somebody just had their rifle over their shoulder because they were going off to practice. It's amazing how the attitudes have changed. The highest profile college campus shooting took place in a state that bans firearms and concealed carry on campus. A policy, a procedure, a sign does not protect us. The policy, the procedure in that particular state did not stop an insane individual from carrying onto campus and doing harm. It doesn't stop a criminal from carrying. It stops law-abiding citizens from exercising their Second Amendment rights. There are currently 14 states that allow concealed carry on campus. Let's make it 15 and vote down this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll maybe bring this home. On Division 1 and in support, it actually comes to the floor based on testimony from the president in the former speaker's district, president of a college up there, who has some things in place that he thinks really work with respect to honoring students' right to have their guns in proximity. And so that represents him, and it also represents the other colleges and the university who have to deal with putting 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds in an environment together and mixing in, you know, various substances and hormones and all sorts of other things. And in my 31 years, we saw a lot of different things. You know, I want to back up, Senators. I want everybody to understand, this is not an effort to slow anything down. I actually went across the building and found the prime sponsor of this bill and talked to him about this amendment. He didn't have any heartburn with it. He didn't feel like it was going to slow it down over there. And I appreciated the dialogue that we had. There's nothing nefarious about this. This is just simply allowing those colleges and universities the opportunity to put some things in place just to keep people safe. That's it. If you think that certain things don't happen, they do. Up in the college where I worked for 31 years, we had a baseball bat incident one night. Another time we had a knifing. I don't know if it would have been different if there would have been a gun involved, but probably. Luckily, we got those two students to the hospital and they made it through it just fine, and we got everything settled down. Folks, this is just something, you know, 14 states were referenced just a minute ago. And if you take some time and do some homework on this bill, every one of those states that I've found have this piece in it, allowing those university campuses to do what they need to do to keep some people safe. That's all this does, and I hope you'll support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 1 is lines 1 through 11.
Senator Case.
I don't think the other part would stand by its own in that division. So I think you could do it if you had lines 1 through 7 in both divisions, I think.
Mr.
Maybe-
President, I'll restate both of them then. My initial request was to divide 1 through 11 as Division 1.
Yep.
And then Division 2 is lines 1 through 8 and 12 through 14.
That was the way I thought it was. That's why I did that. Thank you very much. We're voting on Division 1. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125. Amendment Division 1. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? No. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinsky? No. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed on Division 1. 10 aye, 21 no.
By your vote, Division 1 to second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125 has failed. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, absent objection, I would withdraw Division 2 of Amendment 1.
Actually, that's withdrawing the remainder of the amendment, so without objection.
Without objection, I would ask that it be withdrawn.
Without objection, second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125 has been withdrawn. We have another amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 125, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, page 6 after line 13, insert.
Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 2 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, I'm going to take too long with this, but this comes from local hospitals. It's, from my point of view, trying to make the bill better and trying to keep local control and trying to address a problem that happens in, Mr. President, what can be a rather supercharged situation, or local hospitals or local emergency rooms. You know, a place of great tension, a place that can be a very emotional, very traumatized place. As we all know, when we face situations in the hospitals, they can be tough. And so this gives our local hospital board a chance, an opportunity to make sure that things stay safe, things stay under control, as much as what can be a very uncontrolled situation. And that's our local hospital. Allow local hospital professionals do the things they need to do to keep their staff, their equipment, and their patients safe at a very, very critical moment when sometimes that is very, very elusive. That's all this amendment does. I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. So either we're not reading the bill here, or this is just another attempt to slow this bill down. I would like everybody to pick up the bill, turn to page 3. Bill says nothing in this section shall be construed to allow the carrying of concealed weapons within a state agency-operated health and human services setting, health and human services facilities that are licensed by the Department of Family Services or health and human services facilities that are certified by the Behavioral Health Division of the Department of Health. So if we were going to really solve some problem that's scary here, that's where we would have done it. I think that the places that can make rules, they can make rules themselves. If you go into, this bill is not trying to make someone carry in where the CAT scan machine is, or this, I mean, we already have rules when we walk into buildings, even in places, Mr. President, that have dangerous items where we tell people, hey, you can't do something here. We have common sense that we can rely on. So unless there's a problem with page 3 and the top of page 4, I would ask that we resist this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bouchard. Senator Kinski.
Call for the yeas and nays.
Okay, we had a misfire there. Senator Baldwin.
Just real quick, Mr. President, I don't want to take very long here. You'll find my name on this amendment because I have a concern for hospitals. I have a little experience with weapons in hospitals. Oddly enough, the most dangerous place in the hospital for weapons, for any violence, is in the OB section of a hospital. In my way former days, I worked in security in hospitals, and that was a place I was called to consistently. It was very unpredictable, very sporadic, but it was immediate and it happened very quickly. So I do have a fear, and that's why my name's here. I had an incident where I had one of the staff carried a weapon. I don't know whether he had a carry permit or not, but he carried a weapon. It was known by several people, but I know that several people were afraid. To respond to one of the earlier comments is, I'm not afraid of the weapon. I'm not afraid of a high heels. Well, I am afraid of my wife's high heel shoe. But in general, I'm not afraid of a fork. I'm afraid of the people that use those for nefarious purposes. So my name is here. Vote yay or nay, but I think it doesn't hurt the bill, and I think it's important that we have that protection, that they can make those rules if that hospital or that facility wishes to make those rules. And with that, I'll leave it to the vote.
Question being called. We're voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 125. All in favor say aye. Ayes and noes, I'm sorry. Okay. Chief Clerk, call the roll. I didn't catch the ayes and noes.
House Bill 125, second reading amendment number 2, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? No. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinski? No. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed on the amendment, second reading number 2, 9 aye, 22 no.
By your vote, second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 125 has failed to pass the Senate. We are back on the bill. Senate File 125 had been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 166, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 166 engrossed, education savings accounts.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
House Bill 166, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 10, line 3, delete.
Senator Case.
Thanks a lot, Mr. President. Really appreciate it. Mr. President, I would move for second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 166, education savings accounts. Mr. President, do you guys all know we have an official state fossil? Did you know that? We do. It's called the Nidia, and it's a fossil fish. And they excavate them over in western Wyoming, and I've bought several of them. There's companies that actually excavate the fish, clean them up, and it's like a bas relief, negative bas relief in a piece of sandstone. It is fabulous stuff. And it's kind of a touchstone on our evolutionary scale, Mr. President. That fish is related to sardines and herrings, and they can trace the lineage, and they can figure out exactly when that fish was laid down in those fossils. It's incredible. And it's in the, I think you say it, Eocene era or epoch, and that has to do when all this new life forms were exploding around the planet. This fish just really exemplifies some of that. So, and we named the fish Nidia for a guy over at the University of Wyoming who was an advanced thinker in geology and anthropology at the time, and his name was, I think it was David Knight, Clinton Knight, and that's what Knight Hall over at the university is named for. So what a cool thing. Mr. President, that fish didn't get laid down there during the flood 6,000 years ago. I'm sorry, it didn't happen. The fossil record and the geological record are very tied together. That's how we've been able to date formations, because if we find that fish in another formation anywhere on the world, it's dated at the same time. Approximately 55 million to maybe 35 million years ago. Incredible. That's the state of science. We have a problem in this country right now in that everybody selects their own information. We see it on this floor, we see it in our citizens in Wyoming, we see it in our country. No longer does everybody sit down and watch Walter Cronkite at the same time and get kind of their impressions of what's happening in the world. You can choose your own information, but you shouldn't get to choose your facts, Mr. President. And so I don't want us to become more fragmented with children being raised in their own set of information that doesn't relate to everybody else. I'm not saying everybody has to teach the same, Mr. President, but it's a bad idea to throw out what we know. So what this amendment does is add to the list of things that have to be taught. And to qualify for the stipend now, you'd have to certify that you teach this theory of the earth. And that's called science. Creationism only works in a broader context when you're not limited to biblical timescales, 6,000 years and 6 days and one more day to rest. I'm not saying that's not an interpretation of the Bible, Mr. President, but what I'm saying, it's not quite as literal as some people like to take it. My amendment says we've got to broaden our look a little bit, at least teach the science. I hope you'll support it.
Senator Beitman.
Which one did he say? Oh.
Beitman.
Oh, thank you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Beitman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, as much as I want to take the bait on this one, you know, I could accept, you know, not teaching unverifiable and unscientific theories such as climate change. You know, and that's in a religion. That is a religion to some people. It's not science. But you know, if you want to poke your eye in Christianity, poke the eye of Christians, go for it. But I'll resist this amendment. And as tempting as it is to go after climate change and the ridiculousness of that theory, that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and it's going to kill us all, I'll vote no on this.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I resist this amendment. You know, I guess ideas are really scary. They're really scary. You know, many of us in the homeschool community, and I'll give you myself as an example, my wife and I, we homeschool. We teach evolution, but we also teach creationism. We're not afraid of ideas. Let my son determine how he wants to believe. We give him both ideas. To delete ideas is wrong. It's wrong, just as bad as this amendment. Against the amendment.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't think this is about deleting ideas. I think this is about trying to make sure that there's a fact basis to the education that's being taught in schools that receive public funds. And that's the intent of this amendment, on and for the amendment. I think it is important that we have a common set of facts. I think it is important that all students that are receiving education and public funds for those education end up receiving an education that is rooted in facts, rooted in science, an education that would actually support that climate change is linked to carbon dioxide, because that is true. That is what the scientists, the consensus of scientists internationally indicate. That is what my training has indicated through science. And not wanting to believe that, I wish it weren't true, Mr. President. I do. It would be so handy if CO2 weren't a problem right now and weren't causing climate change. Boy, we'd certainly have less budget problems in this chamber. No question about it. But this idea that we can just stand up and say over and over again, CO2 doesn't affect the climate, CO2 doesn't affect the climate, CO2 doesn't affect the climate, and have that eventually be convincing to a significant number of people, just as inaccurate.
Mr. President, could we get back on the actual bill instead of have a climate change debate?
Mr. President, on the point of order, I was responding to an earlier comment that was not challenged. I think it's important to respond to that particular comment, and if that had not been made, then I think we can all rest assured I would not be giving the speech right now. So I hope you'll sustain me in a little bit more time. Thank you. And it is specifically to the amendment, because the amendment is talking about sound science. And this is a case study of where a lack of sound scientific training has led to a significant amount of belief in misinformation and an inability to properly interpret data and draw responsible for conclusions from that data. So here we are having an inaccurate debate not rooted in science. It would be nice if public funds would go to dispel some of this misinformation and these erroneous beliefs, Mr. President. On and for the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kind of sitting here chuckling. We're going to have this standard set of beliefs, and we're going to enforce that. And had we done that, we'd all probably be in here saying the earth is flat, because that's what everybody thought a long time ago. On and against the amendment, Mr. President.
Mr. President, part of this amendment is probably harmless but unnecessary. First sentence, science instruction shall include a study. I think you're going to see that universally with or without this amendment, where it's age appropriate. And some of these issues that are discussed don't get discussed until you're later on in the education. But leave that to the educators. I do have a problem with the next sentence. No instruction on creationism or related unverifiable, unscientific theories shall be included as part of the curriculum, and the agreement shall be. Okay. If you're saying no instruction, suppose the kid asks, he's heard of this theory of creationism, what is it? And the instructor can't even explain what it is before saying, I don't think it's accurate. I think this amendment is going way too far and is unnecessary. So I would urge you that we do not adopt it.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, it's a pretty rich conversation that all of a sudden we are most elite amongst us know more than anyone else. It's kind of an odd fact that well, I was talking about scientists, Mr. President. Okay, is that clear? That community has a particular opinion when we haven't even traversed one trip around the Milky Way yet to know even what is going on out there with any changes to the climate and any reasons that might come about because of things that we haven't experienced. From us being the center of the universe, mentioned about flat earth theory, those are all heretics at one point in time. Now, I'll set aside that. Now we'll talk about people's DEI and what they consider as proper, topic to talk about today. And I think that is just as much in question as anything else that I've heard. I'm not going to judge somebody on their religious beliefs. I think that'd be another long debate. But I just don't think we should be trying to then put the current state of belief within the scientific community, which has always been suspect. It's supposed to be a theory, an hypothesis. That is scientific. That's a scientific way of looking at things. Not this outright, it's this way, or it's the highway. And so on and against the amendment, Mr. President.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, let's not parse words here. This is, you can't believe your faith. You have to believe our science. That's what this amendment is. And sadly, if we were telling the kids in schools how to teach CPR, you would be hearing from the schools saying that you can't tell us what we have to teach. That's what you'd be hearing. But here, when we have parents saying, maybe we don't want to put our kids in that system. Let's put them over here. Now all of a sudden it's, oh wait, you gotta teach them like what we want you to do. On and against the amendment.
Further discussion. Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm enjoying this debate. Mr. President, this is so cool because like this issue about the Eocene epoch and climate change just fits in so perfectly because part of the Eocene was some of the warmest temperatures and led to mass extinctions. And then at the end, the world tipped over into a huge ice age. That is so cool. And you can find this evidence all around the geology of Wyoming. When you see those red rocks that I love so much, like the Chugwater Formation, I just love the looks of it, you know, how red that is. That's a situation where oxygen is bound with iron oxide, rust, if you will, Mr. President. But when oxygen is bound up with other materials, it's not available to be bound up with carbon. And, you know, that's so that we don't have as much CO2. The Eocene is when huge beds of carbon were laid down in coal seams. Oil, magnificent, millions and millions of years ago. That's the science. I really enjoyed debating this with you, Mr. President, and I enjoyed the comments, especially the tall senator from Natrona County. He's right on. He's right on. That part about not forbidding creationism shouldn't be in this amendment. But science instruction that will be common and accurate should be. All that happened with those fossil fish a long, long time before 6,000 years ago. Those great sandstone buttresses that we see along the Wind River Range where I live, they didn't happen because of the Great Flood 6,000 years ago. And don't question my Christianity. Faith, I have a very strong faith. It's very personal. But I can't accept a literal interpretation personally. But as I stand here as a senator from Fremont County, proud to be a member of this Senate, I can't accept that taxpayer money would be marshaled for that purpose, to promote religion. That's not right. So I would respectfully ask that this amendment be withdrawn. I'm bringing it tomorrow, and I'm going to work on the part that the good tall senator pointed out and not forbid the teaching of creationism. Thank you, Mr. President. With your permission.
Thank you, Senator Case. Without objection, second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 166 has been withdrawn. We have another amendment. Can we have it read in, please?
House Bill 166, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, page 3, lines 22 and 23, delete.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 2, House Bill 166, ask for the body's favorable consideration. So members, while this looks like a very complicated amendment, about 3/4 of it is just conforming from what happened in the standing committee amendment. So the most important parts of this is and for the body is, I'm adding, the attempt of this amendment is to add pre-K back into the bill to limit the length of the bill to 3 years, and then to give an automatic enrollment for those pre-K students. So if you'll go to the bill, bottom of page 3, top of page 4, this definition has to come back into the bill. And then you have some more conforming language that has to go into the bill. If you go to page 6, line 6, this is where there's some new language added. And while I did have a conversation with the good chairman of education about trying to use the words pilot in conferring with our legal staff and not adding a new section to the bill, they felt it would be better just to limit the funds, the amount of time the funds would be available, and that without further legislative action, then it couldn't continue on. If you go to page 7, page 7, top of page 7, this is where we have the language that for the 4-year-olds and the time has to come back in the bill. And then if you just flip to page 2 of your amendment, page 7, line 5, this allows that ESA, those students, to be automatically enrolled into their kindergarten. So while I appreciate that this looks like a lot of other things, it is nothing more than the rest of it is conforming language until you get to the very end, and it still is conforming language. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to stand for questions, and certainly if somebody points out something that's incorrect in this amendment, as far as in the deletion of the standing committee amendment, I certainly appreciate that. But truly, Mr. President, this is adding pre-K in, limiting the time of the entirety of the program, and allowing for a rollover for those pre-K students to be eligible for kindergarten automatically. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, did have a discussion, and I am thinking that maybe a pilot project is the way to handle the pre-K. But I am concerned that this amendment doesn't get that job done. A pilot project seems to me has some characteristics. We would need to have some definition of how many of these we're going to have or how much money is going to be spent on it, some restraint on it. The virtue of a pilot project, Mr. President, is that in a situation where you're not sure and where you get the kind of criticism that we had that it had not been thoroughly thought out, you get some practical experience that allows you to think out exactly what you need to specify, what works and what doesn't, and what winds up, in this case, is just a subsidized daycare, then that's a very separate kind of an issue. And I would be prepared to support such, Mr. President, but I don't think this amendment achieves that. The page 6, line 6 until July 1, 2028. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's well beyond the period of any appropriation we make in this anyhow. I don't see how that affects things particularly. If you said the authorization for the pre-kindergarten amount expired at that time, that would be one step toward a pilot project, but I don't think it would be the full thing there, and I don't think we ought to. I think that's something that we need to fix in the amendment. So, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm going to oppose this amendment because I don't think it reaches where I think we need to go. I think it gets us back into doing the full-blown program, where the testimony really was that we hadn't thought that out adequately and we're not ready for that. And I am concerned about that. So, Mr. President, on and against.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing Senator Barlow for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I do appreciate the good senator's comments. I actually would ask you, he didn't make any comment maybe about the pre-K, so I'd actually ask you to pass this amendment, and then we'll bring a third reading amendment that will be more tailored to the good senator's concerns. And like I said, this morning, I went in and tried to come up with something that fit that, and it just would have taken more time than I had, but I will work on that. I commit to working on that with the good tall senator from Bates Creek if this amendment should pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. We're voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 166. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No. The amendment has failed. Second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 166 has failed. We're back on the bill. House Bill 166, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Signing of enrolled acts, Senate Enrolled Act number 34.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 34, being original Senate File 14, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 34, originally being Senate File number 14. I have so signed. Senate Enrolled Act number 35.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 35, being original Senate File 113, an act relating to highways.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 35, originally being Senate File 113. I have so signed. Bills on third reading. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do we have a consent list?
Mr. President, we do have a consent list, and your consent list is as follows. House Bill 3, property tax exemption for long-term homeowners. House Bill 29, cold case database and investigations. House Bill 58, forensic genetic genealogy pilot program. House Bill 77, simple assault menacing. House Bill 90, newborn child safe havens, age of child.
Would anyone like any of these removed from the consent list? Seeing none. Having been read 3 separate times, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, House Bill 3, property tax exemption.
Without objection, anyone else? Very good. Thank you. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? House Bill 29, cold case database and investigations. House Bill 58, forensic genealogy pilot program. House Bill 77, simple assault, menacing. House Bill 90, newborn child safe havens, age of child. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson? Baldwin? Barlow? Whitman? Boner? Bouchard? Brennan? Case? Cooper? Dockstetter? Ellis? French? Furphy? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones? Kinsky? Kolb? Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott? Pappas? Rothfuss? Salazar? Schuler? Scott? Steinmetz? Cooper? Excused, Mr. President?
Excused.
Excused, and President Driscoll.
Aye.
On the consent list, 30 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 29, are there any changes? Larson? Aye to no. Ide? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 29, 26 aye, 4 no, 1 excused. House Bill 58, are there any changes? Beitman? Aye to no. Ide? Aye to no. Steinmetz? Aye to no. Larson? Aye to no. Kolb? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. French? Aye to no. Salazar? No. Bouchard? No. Kinsky? No. Hicks? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 58, 19 aye, 11 no, 1 excused. House Bill 77, are there any changes? Beitman? No. Salazar? No. Kolb? No. Larson? No. Brennan? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. McEwen? No. French? No. Kinsky? No. Hicks? No. Steinmetz? No. Bouchard? No. Hutchings? No. Dockstetter? No.
Driscoll, no.
Driscoll, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 77, 14 aye, 16 no, 1 excused. And House Bill 90, are there any changes? Closing vote. Cooper, House Bill 90? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 90, 31I.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 29, Cold Case Database and Investigations, House Bill 58, Forensic Genetic Genealogy Pilot Program, and House Bill 90, Newborn Child Safe Havens, Age of Child, have passed the Senate. House Bill 77, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 77 has failed to pass the Senate. Bills on third reading. House Bill 3, third reading of the House bill.
House Bill 3 engrossed property tax exemption for long-term homeowners, sponsored by the Revenue Committee, an act related to taxation.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I asked this bill be pulled off the consent list because I'm developing a concern here. And the concern relates to our overall financial condition and the overall of what we're doing in the property tax area. I'm getting concerned we're getting ourselves in trouble with too many duplicative bills. And Mr. President, you've got to talk about in this with all the other bills that are outstanding and the budget bill, because there's an interplay between them and we've got to have the whole system make sense. And if we spend too much money in the budget, if we grant too many duplicative property tax and too many property tax reliefs, we'll get ourselves in trouble. We have a very volatile revenue stream in this state overall, and we have to be a little careful. And of all the tax bills, Mr. President, if we're going to say we've net gone one step too far, I find this is the one that is the least attractive, because frankly, with that 25-year provision, we discriminate against many of my constituents that haven't lived here 25 years in this state. Now, I don't know whether I'd qualify for this or not, because peculiarities of the way we organize things for legal reasons in the farming community. But that's something aside here. It seems to me that the more preferable tax relief ones are the ones that cover the part of the population that is being particularly hurt by the increase in right and a broad base, and the broad-based ones in general. And this is not. This is a restrictive one that discriminates against people that are in businesses, particularly, Mr. President, that move people all over the country. And a lot of my constituents are in a mineral-related business, and they live in Wyoming some of the time, and they live elsewhere some of the time, and some of them come back to Wyoming to retire, but they don't make the 25-year provision. And so I find this the least attractive of them, and if we've gone too far, this would be the one to defeat. So, Mr. President, I would like some discussion on how does everything fit together, what's the net effect of all the tax relief bills we've got, so we can tell, is this one taking a step too far and is defeating this bill so we can pass and successfully implement and sustain the other bills? Is that a rational strategy? Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senator Jones.
Mr. President, while I do appreciate the previous comments, I actually think this bill is one that targets the people that we do need to help. These are the people that have lived here a long time. They bought houses when they were so much cheaper and are living on fixed incomes. And in my opinion, these are exactly the people I'd like to help with property tax relief.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of this. Many of my constituents fit into this, and as a good senator in front of me has said, they built this state, they built our counties, they built our communities, and they've been begging me, and I'm sure begging everybody in this chamber for some relief. I know the good senator from Natrona County is saying, how are we gonna fit all these bills in? One of the bills that has advanced quite a ways here, I think it's up next, is not a property tax relief bill at all. It's a property tax increase, essentially, of, started out at 5% cap. Now it's 3%, and I think there's an amendment for it be 4%. So that's just capping the increases. It's not a cut to anybody. So I stand in favor of House Bill 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a good problem to have, too many property tax relief bills. I remember last year, we couldn't get one out. We had to fall back on a constitutional amendment in the final days. We shouldn't have had to do that because we had good bills that were in the process. My colleague right in front of me had a good one, and they went to other parts of the building, disappeared in a big dark hole and never came out because of concerns that we may cut back on our education or local government funding. This is a good problem to have. Let's put this one into the mix, have our good leadership help us sort it out. Let's put some property tax relief out to the state. That's the one thing we owe them as we walk away from this session.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill was mentioned that is going to be stackable. What would be the totality of this bill as opposed to the other property tax relief bills that are floating around? It states clearly that you have to pick an option. You can pick this one or another one. Then when you think about the mathematics involved, why, if the other one, we'll just say is 25%, this one's 50%. So the small group of people, you're talking about a 25% increase from the other bill that we were talking about before. So I think this targets a group of people that have been here a very long time. It targets people who have been paying taxes and are homeowners. So I think it does exactly what I heard, trying to help older people deal with property taxes, give them some relief because frankly, they've been here for a while. And I frankly think they deserve it. So on and for the bill.
Senator Hicks. Nope, excuse me. Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters. The eldest, my sister, qualifies under this. And I told her, well, I qualify too, maybe I should declare a conflict. And she said, you better not, and you better vote yes. So I think I'm with a large enough class of people that I don't need to declare a conflict of interest, and also I'm afraid of my sister, so I'll vote on it.
Good comment. Senator Biteman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So to answer my friend from Bates Creek's question on how these all kind of interplay together. So first, what the department would do is we have, assuming all the suite of bills makes it home and they all get signed into law, how this would play out. First, the cap would apply. So they would look at the increase from the previous tax year to the current year, cap it at whatever percent we arrive at. That applies first. Next would be a homestead exemption. Whatever we decide that number should be, whether it's a dollar amount or a percent, everybody gets that homestead exemption knocked off the assessed valuation. Then this bill would apply, and then any veterans exemptions would apply. So that's how the hierarchy would work. It's all doable. And I would also point out and remind the body that this only, probably, we're looking about 6,500 people statewide. Fiscal note's really small, 4 million, 5 million, in that ballpark range for tax year 25. But we do have to consider all the spending that, you know, is proposed. I am curious to hear how the budget's gonna come out. But the good senator in front of me brought up a good point about, you know, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't, you know, give a lot of money back to the taxpayers and tax cuts and then continue to spend and spend and spend. So those are considerations, and I'll cede that to the good senator from Bates Creek. But on the practicality and how this can be effective and how all these bills interplay, absolutely doable. And I hope that answers how the process would work. And I support this bill, and I think it should pass, so I urge an aye vote on this.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, just for the record, I don't have any sisters, so I'm not afraid of them. I've got a number of brothers that are probably eligible for this program, but I can run faster than they can, Mr. President, so that might explain my vote.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'm on and for this bill. This is a Band-Aid, but until we can get some true structural reform, this is just clawing back the big windfalls that we've seen over the last couple of years, substantial amounts of money. So the amount going back to the people here is pretty minimal relative to the big windfall that we've seen to, state government, local government on the increased property taxes. And it does have a sunset date on it too. Just remember, this isn't something that's going on forever. I think it ends in the middle of 2027. So it's a good start to get things going until we can maybe come back and get some strong structural reform and eventually eliminate property taxes, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
I did it again. I shut my computer off. Hold on. I just looked, Mr. President, I just looked up my property taxes, and they're like $3,260 this past year. I have lived in the same house all my life. My family built the house in 1941. It was finished, just before Pearl Harbor, actually. And Mr. President, I'm 65 years old this year. I got Medicaid. That's a good thing. And I'm going to receive a benefit, I think, of about $1,600 out of this if my taxes stay the same as they were last year. Am I part of a large group of people? Certainly the people over 65 is the fastest growing demographics in Wyoming. And if we give them all property tax relief in one shape or another, we're going to be in trouble down the road because we don't have a different demographic that's going to fill the gap. So it's definitely a pecuniary benefit to me. It definitely is. And so I'm going to declare conflict.
Mr. President, 2 items. One on the conflict. I would urge the senator not to declare conflict. The nature of a general tax, the nature of our Republican form of government is that decisions on taxing and frankly related decisions on spending in general, Mr. President, are made by the legislature because we are representative of the population at large and have the same interests in general as the population at large. And I think it is inappropriate for us to declare a conflict of interest on a tax bill as absent some special provision that is really designed to help us, and I don't see that here. So it's up, Mr. President, it's up to the senator involved, but I think we ought to say This is the topic that we're supposed to vote on. And will be answerable to our constituents who have roughly the same interests that we do. And that's why taxing decisions are reserved to the legislature. The people can replace us at short intervals, and we have the same interests that they do. That's the way to handle a taxing thing, Mr. President. So back on the bill, Mr. President. Frankly, I'm being convinced that this bill is not as expensive as I feared it might be. And I think we're going to be able to afford it. So I still have the concern about the interplay with the spending bills, but the sum is small enough, I think we can live with it, Mr. President. So I think I'm going to vote aye on this bill, even though of all the tax relief, it's the one I favor the least.
Further discussion? Seeing none. We are voting on House Bill number 3, property tax exemption for long-term homeowners. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, House Bill 3. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Conflict? Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Conflict? Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Conflict? Kolb? Conflict? Excuse me, Landon? Conflict. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Conflict. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Conflict.
Conflict. Murphy? Aye to conflict. Cooper, aye to conflict. Garou, aye to conflict. Baldwin, aye to conflict. Kolb? Conflict to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 3, 21 aye, 10 conflict.
Okay, that's the winner. House Bill 3, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elect the Senate, House Bill 3 has passed the Senate. House Bill 45, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 45 engrossed, property tax exemption, residential structures and land, sponsored by Representative Craigo, an act relating to taxation.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
Mr. President.
Senator Larson.
Mr. President, I request House Bill 45 be laid back one day. I'm working on an amendment.
Without objection, House Bill 45 is laid back for one day. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move the Senate stand recess until 2 p.m.
Announcements. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, remind the body, Education Committee, upon this noon recess, Capital Extension Room E005, discussion of interim topics. So ask the members to be reasonably prompt in getting there, because it's going to take some time.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minerals Business and Economic Development will meet with their like-minded committee at 12 noon in room 6 downstairs upon the noon recess to take on interim topics. Thanks, Mr. President.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. President, lunch today has been provided downstairs to those who wish to go have some good food by the Wyoming Community Service Providers, their statewide association of providers of support services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and acquired brain injuries. They serve over 1,000 Wyomingites with disabilities and employ around 1,100 people to support those people. Their mission is to provide ethical leadership that best promotes best practice, innovation, and access to opportunities of choice for people with disabilities.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Select Water Committee doesn't have a number, but we will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. to consider some Select Water and Water Development Commission business, and then entertain interim topics. Room 6 in the Capitol Extension at 8 a.m.
Mr. President, just to, regarding tomorrow, the Select Committee on School Facilities will meet at noon tomorrow to consider interim topics. We don't have a room yet, but just be aware of that. Anyone interested in school buildings is welcome to come down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 7, corporations will meet with our counterparts tomorrow at 8:30, and I believe it's in our regular room 110 down below.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Joint Revenue Committee will be meeting tomorrow upon noon recess in Capital Extension E5 and online to discuss interim topics.
Those opposed, no. Motion is passed. The Senate will stand recessed until 2 p.m.